Good morning and welcome to another Farmer Wellness webinar series presented by Grain Farmers of Ontario. Today we have Kathy Summers here talking about anxiety and how to dial it down. Kathy Summers, who is currently working at the High Performance and Stress Management Clinic, here to talk to you about anxiety and how to dial it all down.
Hi, and a warm welcome to you. It's a really important topic today. There seems to be an increasing prevalence of anxiety in North America, and the research by Andrea Jones-Bitton at the University of Guelph found that Canadian farmers, 58% of them were experiencing high levels of anxiety. So today I wanted to share with you some practical and really going through some ideas that I find many of my clients maybe have not heard before, filling in a few pieces of the puzzle, and then hoping that you'll follow up by experimenting with some of the ideas that resonate with you, by finding out more information, by talking with others and health professionals so that you can increasingly improve your ability to dial down uncomfortable sensations of anxiety. There actually is a definition for anxiety. It's an apprehensive expectation and worry that can be associated with feeling really restless and keyed up, feeling tight muscles, insomnia, headaches, mental blanks, not able to concentrate. When I work with my clients, I find that following the research, there seem to be three components that may predispose them to this anxiety. So I wanted to share with these components with you today and see if any of these give you a place to get started. One big component that begins triggering anxiety is particular breathing patterns. Most often we don't even think about our breathing. We're just breathing in and out and we assume it's just all going naturally all the time. When I was working with a graduate student who came into my office saying, I'm experiencing a lot of anxiety. You know, when I was doing my undergraduate work, things were just fine. But now that I'm a graduate student and there's more pressures on me, I'm feeling a lot of anxiety all the time. I'm wondering how I can settle that down. I was monitoring numerous parameters while he was talking to me. I asked him to relax the best that he can. And I'm showing you the diagram here of those parameters. Specifically, I want you to take a look at the blue line. The blue line is monitoring his breathing. Breathing in and breathing out, breathing in and breathing out. From the left to the right side of the screen is only 30 seconds. And if you count, you can see that he actually had 11 breaths in half a minute. He was breathing 22 breaths a minute when he told me he was relaxing. Now, that's a fast breathing pace for just sitting around. Now, if I'm running, trying to chase some cows in the field, if I am riding my bicycle, doing cross-country skiing, I expect to have a fast breathing rate to get more oxygen into my body, to fuel things and give my muscles some energy. But if I'm just sitting around, if I'm watching Netflix, if I'm having dinner with my family, if I'm reading a book or checking the weather report, it's inappropriate to have a fast breathing pattern. It's a mismatch. And that mismatch can make us feel really uncomfortable. The average pace for a human adult is to breathe about 10, 12, 14 breaths a minute. So somewhere there around 12 breaths a minute would be the average pace. So if I'm breathing in a poor pattern, like breathing fast when I'm sedentary, there are many different things that will be happening in my brain because I'm not getting the same amount of oxygen. Here I've shown you a diagram where on the left-hand side, there's a picture of one person's brain showing lots of yellow and red, lots of oxygen getting in there because they're breathing about 12 breaths in 1 minute while they're just sitting in the chair. They were asked to breathe very quickly, panting like a puppy dog. And 30 seconds later, the picture was taken on the right-hand side, showing now it's much darker, not nearly so much oxygen. In fact, they're not able to concentrate. The perception is different. A lot of thinking capacities are changing. Even things like dexterity and physical capacities are changing. And there is more anxiety. The breathing patterns that generate anxiety, if I'm sedentary, would be breathing fast, like that grad student, breathing more from my chest, rather than from my primary breathing muscle, which is at my waist level, the diaphragm muscle. And another thing that will happen is I'll start having a longer inhale relative to the time that it takes for me to exhale. The longer inhale is meant, again, for if I'm running or moving, to help get more oxygen in. It's also very common in North America to have a lot of breath holding. The Healthy Computing Lab at San Francisco State University is reporting that there's an unbelievable amount of breath holding when people are working on their computers, when they're on their devices. I suspect it's because we're trying to be vigilant and paying attention. We hold our breath as part of that. There's an evolutionary reason why we may be holding our breath. If I'm walking out through the farm beside the fence, I hear a little bit of a rustling in the bushes. I ask myself, was that a snake? Is that a coyote? Is this dangerous here right now? I'm going to hold my breath to better hear what is going on, because the sound of our own breathing is actually pretty noisy. If you were to put your hands over top of your ears and actually listen to the sound of your own breathing for a breath or two, you'll realize how noisy it is. And so over time, humans have evolved that part of vigilance or paying attention may include holding our breath. But breathing is a vital human function. And if I start skewing my breathing, and I'm doing this a lot in a day, it will actually make me very anxious. When we met in a previous webinar, I had you try an experiment. We're going to quickly do one part of it again right now. I'm going to ask you to take your hands and put your hands at the level of your belly button, at your waist level, letting your shoulders relax and your arms be at ease. And cut out distraction. Close your eyes or half close your eyes for a moment and turn your attention inwards, noticing this region behind your hands, the region around your waist from your belly button to your backbone. And as you're tuning into your waist area, ask yourself, is there any tension here? Frankly, many people are unaware of when they're holding tension in this region of their body. They're often too busy just trying to get through the situations ahead of them for the rest of the day. So while you're paying attention right now, I'm going to ask you to pull your stomach in a little bit. Not super tight, just a bit, so you can feel what the tension is like that you're holding there at your waist. This is part of our response for fight, flight, and freeze. If we suspect that this is a challenge, I want to fight my way through it, whether it's truly a physical fight with punches and kicks, or a mental fight just getting through the time demands in the rest of my day, or a conflict that's going on with my family or a group that I belong to. That tension around the waist is to protect me from any blows and punches or kicks that may be coming my way, because the bony ribs only come down so far, and below that, those delicate organs are left exposed. So our muscles at our waist will tighten up just like this. Like when we're pulling in our stomach, there'll be a bit of tension to deflect potential blows coming our way. As you're holding some tension right now at your waist, just a bit of tension, notice how it feels at the waist, in the sides, the low back, but also notice how it feels in your chest, your shoulders, because your brain is getting a message saying there's a problem breathing naturally from the diaphragm region. So get the part-time workers on the job, and we'll literally start to recruit muscles across our chest, in our shoulders, and even some neck muscles to help us with breathing. This would be great if I've been running for 10 kilometers and I'm starting to get exhausted. This is the backup plan to start recruiting other muscles to help with my breathing. But if I'm just sitting around, pondering how things are going on the farm these days, and I'm starting to breathe like this, because some of those thoughts maybe have got me tightening up around my waist, thinking I'm going to fight my way through the challenges ahead of me for the rest of the week. There's many names for this breathing pattern where I'm overusing my shoulders. And one of the names for this breathing pattern is an anxiogenic breathing pattern, which is just a fancy term that means it generates anxiety. Overusing our shoulders to breathe literally generates anxiety, and it's also been found that we're not such a clear thinker and we're not such a good problem solver. The way we turned on that anxiogenic breathing pattern was by holding the tension around the waist. So right now, let go of the tensions at the waist and tell it to let go more. We rarely let go of all tension the first time we say to let it go. So tell your waist to let go more and more. And remind yourself, nobody's punching me in the stomach right now. I'm safe. It's okay to let the defensive shield be at ease. So I can actually breathe more from my diaphragm. In fact, the better you get at releasing the tension at your waist, you might start to notice that each time you breathe in, your waist moves just a little bit forward towards the screen in front of you without any effort on your part at all. It just happens naturally. So the more you relax, there can be movement at your waist with your breathing, moving away from an anxiogenic breathing pattern to a much more calming breathing pattern. So a quick recap, if I can let go of the tension at my waist, I'll start to breathe in a way that may help decrease anxiety. Now, some of my clients are wearing such tight jeans or a tight belt, there's no way there can be any movement at their waist with their breathing because their clothes are too constrictive. If that's what's happening right now, it's okay to undo the top button of your jeans. It's okay to loosen your belt a notch for the rest of the webinar so that you can be more at ease. Some of my clients have been under stress for so many days, weeks, months. They've gotten so good at holding the defensive shield engaged, always waiting for the next shoe to drop, the next bad thing to happen. But the first time we do this, they cannot let go of the tension at the waist. But be heartened, if this is you, it will come with practice. If every day you were to practice letting go of tensions at your waist, within 2 to 3 weeks, you'd find you could do that and you can breathe more effortlessly low in your trunk from your waist. So if you've had your eyes closed, you can open them at this point, allowing yourself as much as possible to be breathing low in your trunk from your waist. So we're not having the anxiogenic breathing pattern, overusing the shoulders. And the dimensions of breathing so that we can decrease anxiety will be to breathe more low in my trunk from my waist, but also to slow it down. Like that gradual, slowing it down can have a huge impact. If we lengthen the exhale, that has a calming effect, taking just a little bit longer to breathe out than it does take to breathe in. So that grad student that was breathing very fast. 1 week later, when he showed me what he was describing that he was practicing on his own, there was an amazing difference. When he was sitting back and relaxing, in half a minute, there were just 3 breaths. He was breathing 6 breaths a minute. This seems to be the sweet spot. If I'm breathing at a pace that's very close, breaths in 1 minute, and everybody's going to be different, which pace really resonates with them. It has something to do with our height and our physiology. But very really helps turn on the parasympathetic nervous system of our body, which is the part of our nervous system that calms, heals, restores, and rests us. Well, here he is, breathing at about 6 breaths a minute, and saying to me, I've been doing this a lot during the week. The anxiety has decreased noticeably. In fact, I'm actually enjoying being at school this week, and I'm much better able to focus and think through the problems that are coming at me in my classes. For some of my clients, it takes much more than 1 week of training to be able to get this kind of result. But breathing can be a big factor. Right now, with your eyes closed or half closed, count for yourself. How many seconds is it taking for you to breathe in? And how many seconds is it taking for you to breathe out? Counting how many seconds it's taking to breathe in and how many seconds it's taking to breathe out. The average for when people are just sitting around in a meeting would be about 2.5 seconds to breathe in and 2.5 seconds to breathe out. But if they were starting to turn on a faster breathing rate, it might be 1 second in and 1 second out. Breathing at that sweet spot of 6 breaths in a minute where each breath is about 10 seconds in the minute, would be breathing in for about 4 seconds and exhaling for about 6 seconds. That's what this grad student was doing, breathing in for 4 seconds and out for 6 seconds. Is it possible for you right now to slow down your breathing to a comfortable, slow pace? Maybe you won't actually be at 6 breaths in a minute, or 4 seconds in and 6 seconds out. People who can comfortably slow to that pace may have a history of doing scuba or swimming. Perhaps they have done yoga or martial arts. Maybe they've played a woodwind instrument or taken singing lessons. And so it's easy for them because they've done a lot of breath training in the past. But if that wasn't you, then just do what you comfortably can. Slowing down the breathing, a bit slower to breathe in, a bit slower to breathe out. And if over the next few weeks you practice, you'll find over time it's comfortable to go more and more slowly until you can breathe for about 4 seconds in and 6 seconds out. Doing this now for a minute on your own. If you're comfortable focusing on breathing, just slowly breathing in and slowly breathing out. Now 60 seconds has passed doing this breathing in silence. How did that feel to have a minute of quiet? Did that minute go by really quickly when you were counting the seconds to breathe in and the seconds to breathe out? Or did that minute seem like it was taking forever? In our society, we seem to have a constant diet of stimulation with our earbuds always in, screens always on, stuff happening always around us. But to have a minute of quiet, to just tune into ourselves, focusing on our breathing, might have made that minute feel awfully long. But I want you to get a sense of what that minute could feel like, because the research is telling us that if I could have this particular breathing pattern where not only am I breathing slowly, but in the diagram, you can see with the blue line going up and down at this pace, the red line, which is the pattern of the heartbeats, is also going up and down in a particular pattern. It's called a sine wave pattern. Maybe you remember that from high school math or physics. The sine wave is a particular pattern of moving up and down. And when we breathe slowly and we're at ease, we turn on a sine wave pattern of heartbeats. This grad student was doing that when they were breathing in, their heartbeats were speeding up. When they were exhaling, their heart rate was slowing down. Breathing in and heart rate speeding up, exhaling and heart rate slowing down. This is a hallmark of turning on the parasympathetic nervous system. And research telling us that if people can turn on the sine wave pattern of heartbeats, it may have a big impact on things like anxiety, improving heart health, decreasing irritable bowel symptoms, and some other factors, including thinking and performing better. For 1 minute of doing this, it might have felt like a long time, but I might need to do 3 continuous minutes of having the heartbeats in the sine wave pattern before we can physically measure that there's a decrease of inflammatory responses in the body, a beefing up of the immune system, improving in how the heart is functioning. But if you're a person experiencing anxiety and some of those uncomfortable sensations of tension across the chest, feeling like my heart is pounding or there's palpitations or skipped beats, feeling like I'm not able to get enough air, it's hard to catch my breath. My mind, it's tough to focus. There's blanks when I'm trying to think and process information. If I'm feeling this, probably poor breathing has been the trigger for these sensations. But I'm going to need to do this for more than 1 minute and more than 3 minutes. In fact, Litchfield is telling us that I may need to do this type of breathing where I'm breathing low in my trunk from my waist rather than the shoulders. And I'm breathing slow, 4 seconds in and 6 seconds out, with that longer blow out. Breathing like this for a minimum of 7 minutes before it might register in my brain that I could say, it feels like it's easing a bit, a little bit more comfortable to catch the breath coming in a bit. I want to settle down the anxiety a lot, Kathy. Then more than 7 minutes may be necessary to calm ourselves physiologically. We're born with a mechanism, fight, flight, freeze, the stress response, the emergency response, or sometimes it truly is just anxiety response that I'm gearing up to meet the challenge. And my body is changing with this fight, freeze mechanism. And what I need to recognize is I can instantly turn that one on. I needed it for survival, but I do not need an instantaneous calming button for survival. I can't just mellow out in 5 seconds or 10 seconds. So it may take 7 or more continuous minutes to change some of the really uncomfortable sensations of anxiety. So that 1 minute of silence give you a sense of what that could feel like to take a period of time. Could you do that for 3 minutes? Could you do it for 7 minutes? Sometimes people find it helpful to stay with it if they are counting or using other things to engage their mind. In fact, some of my clients like to use monitors where they can actually see something on the screen, like the blue and red lines that we're seeing right here. It's called biofeedback, where we are looking at the variability of our heart rate. So if I was to think about maybe using on my phone or on my tablet that are devices I've already got, and I want some apps where I don't have to buy any more hardware, any more pieces of equipment. For $15 or less, you can purchase some apps that will check the variability of these heartbeats. You're not going to Google for heart rate biofeedback, because that type of feedback will just tell you whether your heart is beating at 68 beats a minute, 72 beats a minute, and that's not nearly so telling as the pattern of the heartbeats, looking to see if we've got the sine wave pattern or not, how close we're getting to it. And so if you're interested in doing some heart rate variability biofeedback, I've listed some apps here that you, quite frankly, with most of the training that I do with people, maybe especially if they're a competitive person, or it stresses them out to actually see numbers and say, I'm not getting the variability I want, I don't think I'm very good at this, we usually suggest the first 3, 4, or 5 weeks of training, maybe without the feedback of whether I've got that heart pattern of the sine wave, maybe just downloading some free breath pacer apps that will help me just pay attention and breathe in for about 4 seconds and out for about 6 seconds. The top ones are free. The bottom line is free for the first month. So you can experiment with that. And know that if I use breathing, there's a huge subset of people with anxiety that if they could breathe more low from their waist, more slow, with a longer blowout, and self-calm through their day with a high frequency, it can significantly impact their anxiety. In fact, the research is most currently suggesting that if I'm comfortable doing breathing as a strategy, and I could teach myself how to breathe in for 4 seconds and out for 6 seconds, if I could do that for 20 continuous minutes every day for 10 weeks, that would be the experimental period to see how much of an impact breathing may have for me in helping decrease the discomfort of anxiety. Besides breathing, there's another subset of people, other trigger that can really get the anxiety going. And this trigger is worrying, thinking to themselves inside their head, things like, what if the crop is too wet? It's too late. It's not saleable. What if my debt to asset ratio is really getting worse? What if there's even more negative financial consequences? Or what if my concerns are about my health or something going on in my family? Or maybe it's about other things in life. What if is the scariest phrase that I know. When we say what if, it tends to turn on a stress response because we're thinking about scary things. stuff that we perceive as being unmanageable. It would be awful if that happened to me. It would be horrible if that happened to me. There actually is a definition for worrying. The definition of worrying is that I am thinking about negative things that I'm really afraid are going to happen in the future. And because I'm afraid of them, I am turning on an anxious response. We can't stop worrying. We've got a human brain that allows us to think that there may be possible problems coming up. And there can be an evolutionary advantage to that. If I understand there's a problem coming up, if I could take steps to prevent the problem, or if I can't prevent it, what would I do to get through it? How would I cope through that problem to get through it the best I can? That tends to decrease the anxiety, having a plan. Because most people, although we know the antidote is to come up with a plan, they don't do it. Because of the negativity bias of our brain, they're hijacked by overestimating how bad the problem can be, underestimating their abilities to deal with it, and starting to ruminate or just think over and over and over about the problem. We're going to be talking much more about worrying and how to deal with these pitfalls of that negativity bias of our brain that hijack us and make it so hard to come up with a plan in our next webinar. So for today, let's suffice to say that if I could just be aware that I'm saying, what if there's a problem? And especially if I'm saying, well, what if it's really bad? And what if it's even worse than that? That I am escalating my own anxiety and stress by not stopping that track of thought. Ideally, I'd say, stop. I'm worrying about this. Okay, what's the plan? Get out a piece of paper and literally write down, what am I going to do to prevent that if possible, or to minimize it if I can make it a smaller problem? And if neither of those are possible, what am I going to do to cope through the situation? So I have written down my action plan, and I take when it's appropriate. Once I've got the plan in my mind, remind myself, let that go for now. I've got a plan. I'll activate the plan when it's time. Now it's time to move on and do some other activities that can be worked on right here, right now, today. Worrying can be, the more we worry, the better we get at it. If this is something that you want to curb, then tune in 2 weeks' time when we're really digging deep into this specific topic of worrying. It's such an important component of anxiety that we're setting aside a whole hour for that in the future. For people who are worriers, coming up with a plan, reminding myself, I will handle the situation. Now, I might not like it, and it might not be easy, and it might not be comfortable, and I might feel some stress while I'm going through it, but I will handle it. And I've got a plan. I'm going to move forward, is a really great place to start. Breathing is a subset of trigger for a huge portion of people who have anxiety. Worrying is another subset that can trigger anxiety. And there's a third component. The third component are people who have a high level of reactivity. And partly it's what we're born with our nervous system. Some people are just more highly reactive. When things happen, they respond. If we think about a large tree falling over in the woods with a huge bang and crash as it hits the forest floor, the white in that woods, the tail will be up and they're running away instantly. High reactivity with that deer. Very different from the cow that's in the field beside the woods, chewing its cud, hearing the loud crash, still chewing the cud, turns its head. Anything going on over there? What's happening? A much lower level of reactivity with that cow. People are born differently. Some people are born with a high level of reactivity. We all can ramp up and make ourselves more reactive, meaning that we can also be shortening our fuse so that we'll have a more strong or extreme stress reaction or anxiety more quickly in stressful or anxious situations. We would like to know what tunes us to have that shorter fuse and what are strategies to lengthen the fuse. We get a shorter and shorter fuse if we worry all the time. We have a shorter and shorter fuse if we're thinking predominantly about all the negative things that are happening today and all the hassles that are going on. These things shorten my fuse. What are things that can lengthen my fuse? Well, obviously, learning worry curbing strategies, breathing, slow breathing for 2 minutes or more starts releasing glutamate and other chemicals through our nervous system that helps calm us down and lengthen the fuse. So these topics we've already talked about. I mentioned that dwelling so much on the negative things, the hassles and irritants of the day, also tend to shorten my fuse. So you may be familiar with Oprah has said for years, before you go to bed, mentally review 10 to 15 things that you're grateful for that happened, things that you appreciate. In my mind, I often think about it like a set of accounting books. If in my accounting books, I'm focusing solely on the red debit column, that can really stress me out. I'm only seeing the money going out. But in my accounting books, there are 2 columns, the red debit column and the black credit column. If we could give equal time, recognize that in every day, yeah, that was pretty uncomfortable. I didn't like when that was happening. That's really negative, or that's an injustice and it was unfair. But if I could also be aware of some of the things that were pretty amazing. When the sun shone through the clouds onto those flowers and just lit up their color, that was just awesome to see that. Hearing that child laugh, feeling the taste of chocolate on my tongue at lunch, feeling really great when my favorite song comes on the radio and I'm in the cab of my tractor. But these things are the black credit column. It's not just negative things that happen to us every day. If we can be more aware of both sides of this equation, balance the books better in our brain, we are working towards a brain that is more balanced and not so super reactive, that can spark anxiety so much more easily. So the 3 most common factors turning on anxiety are a high level of reactivity, worrying, poor breathing patterns, or combining all of them. Some people might not be only in one camp. They're doing a little bit of all of these in particular combination. For the rest of the time that we've got together, I'd like to share with you some other pieces of information of things that can trigger anxiety that some of my clients tell me they haven't thought about so much before, or they have never heard before. When I think about decreasing anxiety, I think sometimes it's very frustrating because there's so many components. It's not just one thing. If I knew what was turning it on, I would have figured out a long time ago how to address that. Usually it's a combination of things happening all at the same time. So what are these other things combining with the 3 previous we've already discussed? I often liken it to filling up a glass. If in the glass I had a little bit of water, things are okay. But if on top of that I'm pouring in a little bit of milk, orange juice, coffee, hot chocolate, and I keep on filling up, I'd maybe get to a point where the glass is spilling over. That's when it's really uncomfortable. I'm having a strong episode of anxiety or maybe even a panic attack. What are the things most commonly that fill up the glass? We've already talked about breathing. And when I'm sedentary, breathing more from my chest, breathing quickly, having a longer inhale than exhale. Breath holding also could be a factor for some people. We discussed worrying, and the research is telling us, especially if I'm worrying about criticism, not doing things well, it's not good enough. Or maybe worrying about having more anxiety, worried about having a panic attack. Or when I'm feeling some of these sensations, what if there's something wrong with me? What if there's something awfully wrong with me? Level of reactivity. In addition to these, though, we can be filling up the glass with our own adrenaline. When we turn on a stress response, whether it's something negative that's happening in my life right now and I'm dwelling on that, or it's a fire alarm going off, or I'm getting really excited. I had a client who was so excited one morning about the opportunity to take her child to Santa's village that day. She was so excited and so much adrenaline was pumping through her system. She actually had a panic attack and felt so uncomfortable in the end they couldn't go. So it could be good kinds of stress or stress that's not feeling very comfortable. The adrenaline in my body fills up the glass. And there are things that we ingest that mimic adrenaline. Things like energy drinks, caffeine. In fact, caffeine does everything that adrenaline does. It changes our heart function, our stomach function. It changes the blood flow patterns in our body. It tightens our muscles. It makes our brain race. This is why some people have caffeine first thing in the morning, pump themselves up to feel like they are waking up, to feel things going on in their body and kickstart their brain. But are you aware that if you were to have 1,200 to 1,600 milligrams of caffeine in your body, that is the biological equivalent, being so revved up, the equivalent of an anxiety attack. That's like 4 Starbucks supersize in a day. Some of my clients have been able to drastically decrease their anxiety by decreasing their caffeine use. So that may be a consideration if you're having a lot of caffeine. Never stop cold turkey because there are side effects from doing so. What you would do is gradually wean off so that it's comfortable. And if you're using your caffeine for energy, then maybe substituting and using good quality food for energy. Eating every 3 to 4 hours, some carbohydrates for energy fast and protein for energy to last 3 to 4 more hours. That good quality food every 3 to 4 hours, as a meal or as a snack, could help fill you so that you really wouldn't need that much caffeine. Maybe just in the morning to get you started because you love it. You don't want to restrict yourself completely. But if you're experiencing a lot of anxiety, sometimes physicians would ask you to decrease the amount of caffeine that you're consuming because it might be filling up the glass and making you feel even more uncomfortable. Other drugs can increase anxiety. People who use asthma inhalers, that's usually a steroid, mimicking our own stress chemicals, our own stress steroids. Often people will feel more anxiety after using the inhaler. People who are changing the levels of alcohol in their body, very well known to increase anxiety, other stimulants called uppers, and many people who use marijuana have told me that it's actually increased their anxiety. Our own hormones may increase sensations of anxiety related to the hormone thyroxine. People who have a hyperthyroidism or Hashimoto's disease, where there is more thyroid hormones in their body. For women, the levels of progesterone and estrogen can have an impact. In fact, from day 21 to 28 of their monthly cycle, there may be much more progesterone. Accelerant, we've talked about breathing as a trigger already. Maybe you've heard about PMS around the time of our period, and the anxiety with that partly may be biologically driven because of our own hormones. Dietary factors have an impact. Vitamin B12 deficiency makes people very anxious. I meet at least one person every year who tells me that once they had their B12 deficiency addressed, their anxiety resolved. If only it was that easy for the rest. So if you are unsure about this, it is a blood test that you could ask your doctor about. Do I have low vitamin B12? And you might be saying to yourself, just a second, I'm a grain farmer. In North America, we often fortify our grains and cereals so that there's vitamin B12 there. How can people in North America have a B12 deficiency? Actually, it may be more common than we would expect, because if I have an ulcer or a stomach problem, if I have a history of being a vegetarian, vegan, or anorexia and bulimia, I may be more at risk for a B12 deficiency. People who skip meals, our body expects fuel to come in every 3 to 4 hours, and if it's not coming in the form of food, we're going to release some stress chemicals to mobilize some energy, burning some fat stores, and even muscle if necessary. So it's highly recommended that you do eat every 3 to 4 hours, eating some protein and carbohydrates. Try to avoid eating sugary foods on an empty stomach, because there's the high and the crash. With the caffeine and the sugar, they're considered false friends. They promise they're going to give us all this energy, but they turn around and stab us in the back, because 2 hours later, we've got the crash. And people who are prone to anxiety, that crash could spark anxiety, in fact, even panic attacks. So it's highly recommended to eat every 3 to 4 hours. And if you're going to have sugary things or caffeine, that you would have it after you've consumed the protein and carbs, so there's not such a crash from consuming those. Now, I've also listed here some other foods or ingredients that may be part of foods. These themselves do not make us anxious. If I have MSG, if I'm eating foods with tyramine, which is an amino acid that's in certain foods like aged cheese, in red wine, chocolate, in pickled herring, things like this have a lot of tyramine in them. Or if I tend to be a person who has a bit of a reaction to gluten or dairy or sugar, these things in themselves do not make people anxious, but our body is responding to them. With the MSG, the tyramine, our blood vessels are constricting. And I might not be saying, hey, wow, I feel sort of funny. Obviously, my blood vessels are constricting. Usually people are saying, I feel sort of funny. And then they say, what if there's something wrong with me? What if there's something awfully wrong with me because my body feels funny right now? And they're worrying. The combination of foods that make a response in our body and not understanding what that response is coming from, we might start worrying about it. Christine Podesky is a woman who has worked with people who have anxiety and depression. This has been her career's work. She says some of us get caught on the fish hook of anxiety. You're familiar with the idea of fishing. You put a little bait on the hook, you put that in the water, the fish comes along, they get caught on the hook, and then they get reeled in. Sometimes we are reeling ourselves in to getting anxious. That I'm swimming along and I say to myself, I feel a bit funny right now. And if I don't understand where the funny comes from, and I'm very good at worrying, the most common thing Podesky says is people will start saying, what if there's something wrong with me? And then they don't ask, well, where could that be from? Or how about I take 3 minutes and just breathe, distract, focus on something, check in 3 minutes and ask myself, did that sensation of discomfort or funniness, did that increase? Did it decrease, or did it stay the same? What happened with that? That would be maybe the ideal way to deal with it if I'm feeling funny. I'm feeling a sensation. Instead of jumping the gun, oh my gosh, what if there's something awful? I feel funny. Okay, it may increase or it may decrease or it may stay the same. How about I just do some breathing or distract myself with something, and in a couple of minutes I'm going to come back and see what was going on there. The people who get into trouble are the ones getting reeled in to anxiety, saying, what if there's something awfully wrong with me? What if it's really bad? What if I'm having an episode? And when I'm saying that, I'm scaring myself, and I start releasing adrenaline into my body to fight and flee through this uncomfortable situation. So yes, you're hearing me say that often it's a combination of these things. It's not just one trigger, it can be a combination of them. And some of these foods in and of themselves are not triggers, but combined with worrying, they can be. Potent triggers is a combination. Having eaten for a number of hours and I'm breathing quickly. The combination of poor breathing on an empty stomach can make a trigger for anxiety that's more potent than most of the others that I've mentioned so far. Lack of sleep is well known as a factor to help make us more anxious. There's a subset of people who experience panic attacks that if they're short on sleep one night, not only are they going to be more anxious the following day, there's a much greater risk they're going to have a panic attack that day, simply from being short on sleep. I'm a person who's not exercising, if I'm not moving my body, especially if I'm an individual who holds tension in my body, the one who furrows the brow, squints my eyes, clenches my jaw, my shoulders are up around my ears, I'm walking around the farm with my arms tight, hands in fists, and not really letting go of those tensions, stretching my body. A byproduct of stress or stress chemicals, a byproduct of tight muscles is lactic acid. And circulating levels of adrenaline, cortisol, lactic acid escalate our anxiety. So it would be ideal if I could be physically active for 20 continuous minutes every day to burn the stress chemicals and burn some of the lactic acid out of my body. So I realized I sounded like your grandmother, that to really decrease anxiety, it would be helpful if I'm physically active every day, if I get enough sleep, if I eat every 3 to 4 hours nutritiously, avoid having too much alcohol, too much caffeine. Watch the worrying, the stress, breathe. But Grandma was right. All of these things have a very positive impact on our health, and they can help us decrease anxiety. And finally, things in our environment, the situations that we're in of themselves may not make us feel anxious, but combined with worrying, definitely. The most common ones for anxiety would be the combination of worrying about the fact of bullying, feeling tethered to my technology, like I'm never getting a break from what's going on here, always having to have my phone with me, anxious about what is going to be coming in next. The fluorescent lights, because there's a lot of flicker in fluorescent lights. It's amazing the number of people who will say, when I'm in Walmart and there's the bank of fluorescent lights, at some point after being in there for a while, I'll say to myself, I feel funny. Why are they feeling funny? Because of the flicker of the lights. Their eyes are processing that, their eyes, their brain, registering something is different, something just a bit funny. And then they get on the fishhook of anxiety. What if there's something awfully wrong with me? And the adrenaline rushing into their system may mean that they actually are having a panic attack then while they are in Walmart. The combination of these things. I'm telling you that many of the sensations of anxiety are from turning on a fight, feeling funny sensations in our body, and they're worrying about it. What if there's something wrong with me? And the repercussions from that. And we're reeling ourselves into the fishhook of anxiety. Understanding what these factors are, ideally, I'd like to work on taking items down out of the glass so I've got more of a buffer, so it's not spilling over. There's a lot of food for thought here. Rather than trying to tackle a whole lot of things over this next week, is there one idea that we've talked about so far that makes sense to you, that you might consider working on to decrease how much is going on with you? And then when you're better at that, maybe choosing another item, and bit by bit, whittling things down out of the glass. What to do, though, if this glass is overflowing? The two ways to deal with the anxiousness are to prevent it from happening in the first place, preventing the buildup. But what if I'm really anxious right now? What to do? This is a challenging question, and there's no one way to work on it. However, here would be my best approach. Generally, and maybe by talking with other health professionals, following up, you would have something very specific for yourself. The first thing I'm going to ask you to look at is, how am I feeling? Am I so anxious right now that I'm so antsy that it would feel uncomfortable to sit down? Like, I feel like I need to just keep on moving and pacing, and asking somebody to sit down, to breathe, to do a relaxation technique, like, that's just out of the picture. There's no way I would be comfortable. That feels like torture. If that's how it's feeling, even though my strength with the stress management clinic is in teaching people relaxation techniques, I'm not going to be asking you to do a relaxation technique. If you're feeling that antsy, my recommendation is run around this building 5 times. Hop on the exercise bike in your basement and go for 5 or 10 minutes. Or I'm going to ask you to run up and down the stairs 25 times. If you're in the middle of a meeting, excuse yourself. So you have to go to the bathroom, bad. Excuse yourself in the bathroom, 85 jumping jacks. So you're moving your body to burn out some of the adrenaline, because that is what is revving you up so much and making you feel like you have to pace. Your brain has decided this sounds like such a serious situation. It's released so much adrenaline to try and help you fight or flee that it feels like it's overwhelming you. Take the edge off. Move your body. Scrub the floor. Paint your walls. Move your body and take some of the edge off until you can sit down. When you can sit down, if you're comfortable focusing on your breathing, could you breathe in for 4 seconds and out for 6 seconds, or as close to that as you could comfortably do if you've been practicing working with your breathing? Ideally, at least 3.5 seconds in and 3.5 seconds out. Okay, but even slower than that if you can, because physiologically it's going to change what's going on in your blood with the stress chemicals. Unfortunately, you heard me say it may take 7 continuous minutes of breathing before it feels like things are easing, even just a bit. And frankly, most people will not last for 7 minutes with focusing on their breathing, because they still feel a lot of the anxiety, and their brain is going back to that, saying it feels really comfortable. In fact, their brain might be saying, I don't think the breathing is working. Kathy doesn't know what she's talking about. They're judging, they're analyzing, they're thinking about it too much. And so my recommendation would be, do the breathing for as long as you can. And that might only be 30 seconds, 45 seconds. It might only be 1 minute. Do that for 1 minute, whatever you can. And when your mind starts wandering or questioning, then stop doing the breathing and do something with your brain where you cannot think about anything else but just engaging your brain in that particular activity. When I ask my clients to start drafting a list about what they do, where they're thinking about nothing else, many of them say this is hard. And they really have to think about it, some of them for a few days. In fact, some people say they're totally stumped. They've got no idea about what they can do when all they're doing is thinking about a particular activity that is emotionally neutral or emotionally calming. And so the kind of things that I usually ask people to do might be something that engages their brain in a coordination exercise. Right now, put both feet flat on the floor. With both feet flat on the floor, put your right hand up in the air. And with your right hand in the air, draw a circle that's going clockwise. So your hand is going past the imaginary numbers on the clock, 3, 6, 9, 12. And as your hand is going through this space, at this pace, keep that clock going. Even while with your right foot, your right toe, draw the number 6 on the floor right now. Keep that clock going and draw another number 6 on the floor with your right foot. And doing it again, another number 6, while the clock keeps on going. And it looks pretty easy while I'm doing it, because I've done this quite a bit, so I am well practiced. But if you don't usually do stuff like this, you might be saying, this is really hard. In fact, I had to stop thinking about everything else just to coordinate, because one movement was clockwise with my hand, and it was counterclockwise with my foot, and I don't usually do it. And so I had to think about it. The point is, I'm not good at it. I let go of analysis and judgment about trying to do it perfectly. The point is, I choose something I'm not good at that takes some coordination. So I have to think about what I'm doing. Did you have to stop thinking about everything else just to try and coordinate that? Something like this may be a good strategy. You know, juggling some balls or beanbags, playing ping pong, doing the cup song, which you can Google if you haven't heard of that before. People try to replicate it, singing the song out loud at the same time as they're using cups to be the percussion because there's no drums there. Or just pretend you're a drummer and make one foot go with one drumming beat and the other foot go with a different beat. And then try to get your hand to do a third beat at the same time. That takes a lot of focus. Drummers really have to concentrate on what they're doing to get 3 rhythms going at the same time. So we can use physical coordination exercises to help focus on something that's neutral. Or we can use mental coordination exercises. Right now, out loud, spell the word Saskatchewan. Out loud, Saskatchewan. Did I do that right? Saskatchewan. If that was really easy, spelling Saskatchewan out loud, spell Saskatchewan out loud backwards. Because you're going to have to think about what you are doing. Sometimes we need to do something that seems quite silly. But the goal is to get our brain doing something where that's all that we're focusing on. Something that's emotionally neutral, not anxiety inducing, emotionally neutral. If you could make a list of things that you would consider doing that might fit the bill, you might find some things are low level engagement for your mind, some things are medium level engagement, some things may be a high level of engagement for your mind. And with more practice, you'll figure out which ones work best in certain situations for you. Combining this then, if the glass is overflowing, and I feel it would be torture to sit down, then move my body. Once I've taken the edge off and burned some adrenaline out of the system, breathe low and slow with a longer blowout. When my mind wanders, do something that's distracting, a coordination exercise, mentally or physically. And then go back to the breathing. And then distract and breathe and distract and breathe. And I distract long enough so that my brain is under my control. Then I go back to breathing. And I'm trying to ride out 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes. Settling it a bit. Until then it's settled enough that then I can just use my normal work or reading a really good book or a great movie or a funny YouTube video to continue help me riding it out. The thing is that once we've got the adrenaline in our system, adrenaline is a chemical. We can't say, oops, my mistake. It's not really that stressful after all. You adrenaline, go back to the adrenal glands where you came from. It won't do that. It continues circulating around. It has a life. In fact, adrenaline might continue circulating for half an hour, for 1 hour. It may last for a couple of hours if you've released quite a bit of adrenaline. And so doing a 20-minute relaxation exercise, you might still feel a bit of the edge of anxiety. It doesn't mean you've done it wrong with the relaxation. It just means there was so much adrenaline there. It's not all been dissipated out of the system yet. But hopefully by doing these things that we've been talking about, you're able to settle it down to another lower level. That then just by doing everyday activities, you could just ride out the next half hour, the next hour. So after a couple of hours, hopefully you do feel much more comfortable and at ease. We've covered a lot of ideas today. The most common things that really turn on people's anxiety are poor breathing patterns, a habit of worrying and not catching that, or being highly reactive and getting even more reactive because of my breathing or my worrying or other factors. Are there things here that you could work on to begin to tackle it? To lower the level of the glass, and strategies you could use if the glass is overflowing to just get through that uncomfortable situation. The bottom line, it's not what you know, it's what you do. One thing here that you could work this week. Go to the handout that you downloaded. There's an action plan. It's a checklist. It's a checklist of a lot of the things that we talked about. Check off things that you think may be helpful for you. You may be checking off a lot of them or a few of them. But after checking off all the items you think may be pertinent to yourself, could you choose one to work on this week? And ask yourself what, when, where, within the next 48 hours, you could do something with it. Because chances are, if you don't do something within 48 hours, you're not going to do it at all. We've got a good start here with some things that you could do for yourself. But there's so much more. There's some great resources out there. Some books, some apps, some websites. Although the Mood Gym app was built for people with depression, many people report it's helpful for them with anxiety, especially certain modules within that app. So in addition to these specifically about anxiety, so the general resources, working with yourself, your family, your community, your health professionals, I'm really encouraging you to follow up and think about what are the supports for you. Dealing with anxiety is a very important component of working with your mental health. Instead of just alone, connect with your community, your health professionals, and others. A team approach is not what you know, it's what you do. Good luck at getting started.
All right. Thank you, Kathy, for running through that with us today. Definitely some interesting points and definitely points I'm going to be taking with me to kind of tackle my own anxieties that I face every day. Again, send a question to web@gfo.ca and we'll be happy to get those answered for you. All right. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.